Worry, 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 love is passing me by. Worry, 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 I'm so painfully shy. Other guys get all the kisses. Why am I the one who misses? Worry, 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 woe is me.
Fallout is a series where America and China race to see just how fast they can press the big red button. For this video, we'll be talking about the fourth mainline title, which is appropriately titled Fallout 4, a game set in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, but to the inhabitants of the new world that the MC finds themselves in, it's just called the Commonwealth. Our story starts with a nice day like any other, where you go through a short introduction into who you want to be as a character. Like in every Fallout game, Fallout 4 has a very great character creator already built in. But admittedly, I'm a bit lazy, and just usually go with the default for the most part, aside from a different choice of haircut and facial hair option, as typically I don't stay in the character creator very often in most of the games like it. Once finished making a character, you talk to a few people, play with your son, and choose where you want to allocate stats once the Vault-Tec guy comes by. Shortly after, you get a news broadcast. You witness the first instance of the bombs hitting close to home. You run into a nearby vault, conveniently located behind your house, and with you and your family safe, they put you into a chamber. You remember waking up earlier than was probably planned, witnessing someone steal your son and murdering your spouse, depending on if you chose to play as Nate or Nora, the dad or mom, respectively. You get refrozen and thawed out. You get refrozen and thawed out again, but this time, you can actually leave. You have no idea what day it is or what's happening. You just know you have to find your son, and so you go through the vault, pick up your Pip-Boy, and leave to brave a new world that you aren't too sure about anymore. This is when the game starts. It's got a decent story, and I can't fully complain one way or the other. A man or woman out of time that quickly adapts to a world that they no longer fit into. Or at least, that's what the game wants you to believe. It's an amazing concept, as it could potentially explore a bunch of avenues from someone who isn't born into a world like this. When it comes to complaints about Fallout 4, one of the biggest ones is the dialogue and the way it plays into the other story. Oftentimes, it feels stiff and as though it's a game made in 2011 as opposed to one that was made in 2015, 4 years later.
They killed him.
Sir, these things you're saying, these terrible things, I believe you need a distraction.
I don't blame the voice acting, as a voice work in an RPG like this has been around for some time and is still utilized to this day. However, you can tell that a lot of it is played far too safe. The choice of dialogue is usually only some form of yes or no, and that is also an issue that still appears in a lot of games like this. I can kind of understand from a gameplay perspective, as they probably don't want to railroad a player into feeling a certain way. But it hinders the story a bit of the game. For instance, once you reach the main city of the game, properly known as Diamond City, the MC, otherwise known as the Vault Dweller, doesn't really react to anything. As a matter of fact, before you even get there, you have an encounter with raiders. You help save a man named Preston Garvey, who then asks for you to help, and his group tells you about a suit of power armor that you can use, and so you go and suit up and you fight off more raiders. Pretty simple. Up to a certain point, everything goes well. You use the minigun that you ripped off a vertibird, you mowed down some mooks, and it's all fun and games. Up until then, you have a run-in with a very well-known enemy throughout every single game, a Deathclaw, one of the most formidable beasts in the Fallout series. The scene was set up in a super cool way, showing that one was underneath them and came out to fight you after hearing the commotion going on. As a matter of fact, it's probably one of the best openings that you could get to Deathclaw in this game, as opposed to maybe New Vegas, where someone from Sloan just tells you their Deathclaw's over there, and one might run at you without you even seeing or knowing. I really liked this, and it was a really cool spectacle to see. It was a great fight, and one of the highlights of the game, probably the best, if I were to say, when it comes to showing enemies in a new way. The MC, however, doesn't really seem to care about it at all. He doesn't even comment on it or say anything when it does appear and it fights him. I understand that he's probably thinking about his son, but he just fought off a giant lizard with claws the size of lampposts, so you would think that he would at least have some questions about it. This doesn't really stop at Deathclaws though. It happens with pretty much every enemy in the game, be it Mirelurks, super mutants, something simple as a Radroach. It's just... Actually, come to think of it, he only really asks about the Radroaches in the beginning of the game when you kill one in the vault.
Giant roaches? What the hell?
That's really it. I get that humans are pretty self-explanatory, but I would have liked to have at least had an option to really know more about the creatures of the Commonwealth from the perspective of someone that's in the vault. Especially one that was from the year 2077, and even before the bombs fell. It was a pretty missed opportunity, and I think Bethesda could have done more to really lean into that man out of time perspective that Piper so eloquently put when she first meets him. Or her. I played as a male character, so I'll probably mostly say he just because, you know, that was the character I played, but you could totally play as the female Vault Dweller if you so choose. It's really not that big of a difference. As a matter of fact, if you choose male or female, it's pretty much the same experience. There's really nothing different about it, so it's really just, do you prefer playing as a lady or as a man? That's about it. Most of the best writing, though, is story-wise, is when you have a companion. Going back to Diamond City, where you meet a plucky reporter named Piper, who I mentioned earlier, you learn a bit more about what happens in the world, or as much as the game is willing to tell you without you having to go out there yourself. After a while, she decides to tag along. You do some quests with her, and you end up saving one Nick Valentine, a detective who is a synth, a machine that the Institute created. You probably noticed that occasionally you see text saying Piper liked or disliked that. That is one of the many features that the game brings up, where it vaguely tells you whether or not you're in good standing with your companions, and you can even ask about your relationship to them. With most of them, you can even romance, which doesn't do much other than getting a pretty NPC lady to tell you they love you, and it's pretty nice, I would say, in terms of a romance with a character. You can always just choose yes or no, and then if you get maximum infinity, you get a whole new perk, which is pretty cool.
I love you, Curie.
And I love you. The world seems so very bright, and I cannot wait to see what becomes of this.
You can take companions anywhere, and I often like to switch them out for my own personal fun of seeing who would best be where. For instance, I would take Nick into the Glowing Sea, where it is where the bomb that hit Boston fell, and so it's just this massive radiated zone that is containing many different monsters, enemies, and even the Children of Adam, which is a small faction that worships the atomic bomb and radiation. Pretty interesting faction, but you don't really get to know much about them. It's really unfortunate, and it happens a lot. As you get to meet many cool companions, you unfortunately aren't able to have more than one unless you use mods. For this video I did completely unmodded, as I wanted to have this be for the game itself in a completely vanilla state. but maybe I'll make another video on this game with mods soon, and hopefully my opinion changes a bit. Every companion has different kinds of quests, whether it pertains to them and their goals, it's to get them as a companion at all, or to simply help them if they ask for you to do so. Every companion has different kinds of quests, whether it pertains to them, their goals, to get them as a companion, or simply they asked you for help. I didn't get all of them as I already recorded hours of footage up at this point to make sure I covered as many things as possible, but currently it's sitting at 78 hours and I still haven't done everything I wanted to get. So take that as you will. There is so much to do that almost 100 hours isn't enough to really get everything there is to see in this game, especially if you choose to do everything. I did my best to, as someone who has played this game multiple times before, I did my best to make sure that I speed ran through the game, and even then it took a really long time. Granted, I didn't go straight through the story itself. I did do a ton of side quests, as I said. However, just be prepared to play this game for the long haul, as it is an RPG, so it is going to take a long time. The main storyline is fairly linear, and they tell you where to go every time, not in a hand-holding kind of way. There's actually times where you can just follow some well-placed signs or wreckage and get to where you want. Follow a road or read your map. Being lost during the main story should realistically be impossible for people who play RPGs regularly, or for people who have already played this game. But for newcomers, it's a bit of a challenge, in a good way of course, as it makes you think a bit and learn how to use your surroundings without trial and error of doing it in real life. After the first act, you get to see more characters and meet the main factions, what their goals are, and how they differ from each other. Unfortunately, not all the factions can get along, and some require you to kill some smaller ones after dealing with one of the main factions. Although, I say smaller, but they're all pretty much the main faction if you choose to go with them, and only them. It just really depends. Usually, it involves you choosing one over the other, and in the end, the story does require at least one faction to be destroyed. I dabbled into a bit of the factions. It was good to meet people of different or even opposing views. However, the cons outweigh the pros a bit, and there are multiple people that the Vault Dweller can work with and many that can't. You have the Minutemen, a group of people that are inspired by revolutionaries of the same name back in the Revolutionary War, in which Preston Garvey is a part of, the man I mentioned earlier. The Brotherhood of Steel, a faction that has been in every Fallout game since the first one. They are largely hoarders of technology that staunchly oppose any form of scientific progress that can potentially wipe out humanity again, as they are often worried about it in every iteration but 3 for the most part, where in 3 they wanted to protect people from superhumans more than just hoard tech, as you can see in the Capital Wasteland, even mentioned by Elder Maxon, who was a young boy in the events of Fallout 3. Probably even meet him if you so choose to. You have the Railroad, who are very adamant on saving and giving Synths a new name and home, Synths being an android that is often a spitting image of a real person. Throughout the game, you hear people talking about the Synths, and whether or not they are for or against is up to you, as you use the information to determine whether or not you like them. For me, I do like Synths. And for the major faction, the last one, you have the Institute, a secret facility in which science is freely studied and progress is what they are after. A very clean environment that looks almost too clean, as though they aren't allowed to do anything other than research. And you could probably tell immediately who opposes who, in which the Institute creates the Synths, the Railroad saves Synths from people, and the Brotherhood outright hates the Synths, as I said before, they are staunchly against the advancement of science and progress in that aspect, at least ones that could potentially wipe out humanity. Every faction has its issues, be it with themselves or each other. The only factions that really do anything that affects other parts of the world, however, are the Minutemen. And that's due with the mechanic of base building and settling. It works semi-well, but really it isn't much aside from what you get to see places grow and thrive. It works semi-well, but really it isn't much aside from you get to see places grow and thrive due to your hard work. A cool idea, but doesn't have too much going for it and not as much reward as you would like to have. What if you were able to appoint a mayor or have an armory instead of just selling weapons and armor? It felt more like playing house than making a community at times, which I can't fault too much since that isn't the game's main objective. But it was the main selling point at the time. I remember watching a reveal of Fallout 4 with Todd Howard showing the game, and being excited only to play and have it fall kind of flat. Nothing much else I can say about the factions, but maybe nothing much else I can say about the factions, but maybe one day I can talk about them more thoroughly in other videos. I just wish that factions in general were more than just whoever you like the most. There's no incentive to really join one over the other, except for the Brotherhood. If you really want that power armor anyways. But even then, getting power armor is super easy, as the game practically hands you one as soon as you start. And it's pretty simple to find them throughout the game, either standing alone in different power armor stations, or just standing frames by themselves, or even if you have the caps, you can buy frames. Power armor is a pretty easy commodity to obtain, and honestly, one of my favorite parts of the game is utilizing the power armor, so I'm not really complaining about it on that front. You don't have any kind of communication between them, nor are they really that important to the Vault Dweller, as they are all just a means to finding their son. At least in 2011, with Skyrim, you can have the head of the two factions speak to each other. You don't even really get that in Fallout 4, which is rather disappointing. There are smaller ones littered around the Commonwealth, and a new one added after the Anniversary Edition where you can finally fight the Enclave without needing mods. That's all the smaller factions really are, however. There's only one real vault aside from the Vault Dwellers, where people actually live, and the Gunners are just raiders with combat armor, so you can't even really speak to them either. Supermutants only have 2 that work with you at most, or at least that's all I really know about. And the Enclave is a last-minute add-on, so they really only amount to a fight or 2. Again, just raiders in power armor this time. In New Vegas, however, you could be allies or enemies with a whole array of groups, and it would all benefit you in some way. When it comes to Fallout 4, though, they're just a popularity contest for the most part, whoever you like the most. And forget about trying to deal with the smaller factions, they're pretty much non-existent to the character, or you, as a matter of fact. Now for the last segment of the video, gameplay. Arguably the best part of the game, and the only reason I didn't find it completely boring. The guns are all fun to use in their own way, the downside being that they don't do as much damage as you would like to in the late game. I'm not a fan of the difficulty settings in these games, as it just makes enemies into a bullet sponge or fall apart from a gust of wind. There's really no sense of scaling and no in between when it comes to those difficulty settings. So it really makes the game just kind of feel like you're either too strong or not strong enough, which is largely in part of the perk system. In previous titles, you would make a build and it would work out fairly well, especially if you min-maxed it, using your points to allocate for different kinds of skills. However, in Fallout 4, you can get every perk eventually and max out all special attributes, making builds largely non-existent. Why would I think about what perk to choose when I can grind and just get it eventually anyways? The only real upside to that is that you can get what you want quicker while still getting something not as necessary to you later on. There's also no real importance of the perks. With the lack of dialogue options, there's no special dialogue. All of it really just being in a sarcastic reply you can do, which is funny to be sure, but that's really about it. However, that doesn't stop the rest of the game from being fun, or as fun as you can make it be. You can run around in power armor and beat people with a high-powered sledgehammer, going third person making you swing faster. Honestly, power armor is one of my favorite parts of Fallout 4, as I said earlier, as it has the weight and strength to really set you up to win. Putting it on makes you feel like you can actually take on the world. You can use various different workbenches that can make you and your weapon stronger, as well as armor, increasing variety and creativity on how you want your loadout to look, even though it's clear that there are many options that are just better overall. Most of the gameplay just goes from exploration, combat, resupplying via looting enemies or their containers for new goods, and that's all it really does for the whole game. Not the worst thing in the world, but the gameplay loop is too bare bones for my liking, and I would like if there was more to it, especially when enemies really are just bullet sponges at times. At least I can punch them in my power armor. So, with all that being said, it's a good game for people that are a fan of Fallout. It doesn't fully lose that charm other games have, but it really is, or at least was, the most bare bones of all the Fallout games. I don't know about 76, so that may change one day. Maybe not. I really don't have intentions of playing it. But does that make it boring? Well, for me, yes. I was pretty bored with it, especially in the early stages of the game and the later half. The best part of Fallout is largely the mid-game, or at least for Fallout 4, as that's where everything is happening and you can really see what it has to offer. I'm sure mods will make it a lot more fun, and I wouldn't doubt that for a second. It's simply just not my favorite in the series. But, if I have one thing I loved about this game, and I'll say it again, it really is the power armor. That, and I really love Curie. Thanks for watching.
I love you.